Go over adding and subtracting integers. This is a new lesson, but we have actually already talked about integers. If you remember at the beginning of the year, we started talking about integers and how and what the definition was, and then that also went a little bit along with absolute value. So I'm going to go over that briefly with you just to give you a refresher. So today, by the time we finish, you should be able to effectively add and subtract positive and negative integers using models and strategies. You can also use number lines, which I can go over that later, but right now we're just going to go over models and strategies. Okay, so let's go back to what integers were, or what we talked about integers before at the beginning of the year. So integers are positive whole numbers. Their opposite, which are negative whole numbers. And then 0 is included in the integers category, but it's not necessarily an integer. You have your positives. That's from positive 1 to positive infinity. And then you have your negative integers. Those are less than 0, so that starts at -1 and then goes all the way to negative infinity. And remember, integers are whole numbers. So right now we're only going to deal with whole numbers. Okay, so there's a way that you can model out adding and subtracting integers, but then there's also rules. So I'm going to go ahead and list the rules here right now. Okay, in order to add integers, I'm going to tell you, don't use the word add, use the word combine. Because if you're adding negatives, it kind of cancels itself out because you're thinking, how am I going to add something that has a subtraction sign on it? So whenever I say you want to add, just think of the word combine. We're just putting them together, okay? Two positive numbers are going to have a positive sum. So that's just like if we say 4 plus 4 equals 8. Okay, that's how we've always done it. We didn't have to say positive 4 and positive 4. We just know that it's two positive numbers. That's how we've always done it. Okay, but now that we've thrown in negatives, it's a little bit different. Okay, if you have two negative numbers and you add them or you combine them, then your sum is going to be negative. So two negative numbers combined together will give you a negative sum. Okay, if you combine a positive number and a negative number, okay, so if you're adding a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive, doesn't matter what order it's in, if you are going to add them or combine them, okay, you have to take away the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. So what that means is you're really going to subtract that smaller actual number from the larger actual number, and then whatever number had the biggest absolute value, whatever sign went along with that number that had the biggest absolute value, that is the sign that will take lead, and that will be the one that is going to be in your final answer. Okay, we'll get into that. I'll show you examples in a minute. Okay, the internet has, okay, here we go. Okay, if you subtract integers, okay, all you're doing is you are taking that subtraction problem, you're going to change it to an addition problem, and then you're just going to follow the addition rules. Okay, so you know that if you see a subtraction sign with integers around it, you're going to say keep, change, change. Or what I tell my kids is subtraction is keep, change, change. Okay, so you're going to keep the first number, you're going to change the sign, and then change the sign on the second number. Okay, or, well, I put on here the third number. It's the second number. It's the third thing that you'll do, but it's actually the second number. Okay, you're going to work the problem using the rules for adding integers. So once you do your keep, change, change, you just go straight into how you do it for adding or combining. Okay, in this keep, change, change, I have taught my kids to do Swift's Kids Can Count. That does that SKCC. Okay, so to add with modeling, this is not necessarily following the rules right now. We're just doing it with modeling. Okay, so if you look up in the right-hand corner, I have a green circle and I have a red circle. Okay, so whenever you look on a map and you have your key, and you can match the key up with whatever you need for your map as long as it stays consistent within that same map. Okay, well, that's how we're going to use these green and red circles. Okay, so for every green circle I have, that's going to be a +1. And for every red circle I have, that's going to be a -1. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my problem. I have -3 plus a -5. Now, if you notice that -5 is in parentheses, there's a reason I put it in parentheses. It doesn't mean that you're going to multiply it, even though sometimes you'll see whenever you do your PEMDAS that you have parentheses and you have to multiply or whatever. I just have it in parentheses to show you that it is separate from the positive. Okay, so I've got the second number in parentheses just to show you that it's away from whatever operation you're using. And in this case, we're using all addition. Okay, so I have -3 plus -5. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put in 3 of the red circles because those are 3 -1s. So I've got my 3 -1s. That accounts for this right here. Okay, now I'm going to put in 5 of the red circles to make up for 5 -1s. Okay, so I have 3 and I have 5. They're both negative. So in this case, I'm going to combine. So how many negatives do I have? Okay, well, I have this 3 up here and I have this 5 down here. They're all negatives. So in total, I have -8. The answer would be -8 because I have -8 red tiles or red circles. Okay, and those account for a -1, so that's your answer. Okay, down here on the second one, I have +6 plus a -4. Okay, this time I'm going to use green for my +6. I'm going to use 6 green circles. Okay, and then I have 4 negatives, -4, so I'm going to use 4 red circles. Okay, now this one's going to be different than what that first one was because I have negatives and positives. Okay, I'm going to combine them, but instead of just combining them, because I'm using models, I can actually cancel out negatives and positives. So if you think about it, remember back when we were talking about integers and we said a negative always has an opposite of a positive and a positive always has an opposite of a negative. Okay, how a negative and a positive are opposite. Well, you can cancel them out. So if I have a +1 and a -1, if you put those together, they'll cancel each other out. Okay, because it really means +1 and then you put it with a -1, that gives you 0, right? So you just cancel it out. So I'm going to cancel out all my groups or all my pairs of negatives and positives. So I'm going to cancel out these 4 groups that I have here. And then what is left over is 2 positives. Okay, so my answer of +6 plus -4 is just going to be +2. Okay, down here I have -2 plus +1. I'm going to put in 2 red circles that accounts for 2 negatives. And then I have 1 green circle for the 1 positive. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cancel out 1 negative and 1 positive. Okay, when I do that, what am I left with? I'm left with 1 red one, which is a negative. So my answer is -1.